you for joining me here on Language, Culture, and Dr. Lou. And of course, I wanted to talk about this week in American culture. So please do drop a like button on the way in, and hope you do enjoy this little conversation. And of course, I'm going to talk about quite a few things because this week things are pretty big in America, a lot going on here. And so I just first mentioned what I'm going to talk about is number one, the Olympics just ended on Sunday. So we have the medal counts and all that. And I have, some reflections on how the games went for the US. And on top of that, it's also Black History Month. February every year is Black History Month. And sadly, Jesse Jackson died. He passed away. And on February 17th. But this week, we saw his funeral in I think, back in South Carolina, where he was born, and also other remembrance ceremonies around the country in different places. And so I wanted to comment on, a little on the importance of Jesse Jackson and, yeah, and just a little recap on some of the stuff he did because he has been a real leader in the civil rights movement for about 60 years or so now, and so he will be missed. And then on top of that, we've got something else pretty sad, widely covered in the media in the U.S., which would be Nancy Guthrie. She's still missing today. February 17th is day 27 of this, and I'm not liking how the situation is looking. And this is, by the way, the most has gotten more media coverage than any kidnapping since the Lindbergh baby. So that's interesting because that was nearly 100 years ago. So I'd like to comment on that as well. And so, on top of the Olympics and Black History Month and Jesse Jackson's passing and Nancy Guthrie, the investigation to see if we can ever find her, I'd also like to talk about the State of the Union address, which we just had. Um, and and there was also the People's State of the Union going on at the same time, which was sort of a protest of the whole thing. And it was kind of annoying to me that they were going on at the same time because I kind of wanted to watch both of them before making an overall opinion about how the night went. But still, it's okay. I was able to do some of that on the replay. And so, beyond the State of the Union and all that, then I guess the last thing I wanted to talk about is also having to do with politics. This was Hillary and Bill Clinton both testified between Hillary yesterday and Bill today in front of the House Oversight Committee about the Epstein saga and all that. Hi, how's it going? Hello in the chat. I'm very happy to see people here already. So anyway, like I was saying, we have a whole lot to cover in here. And so let's go back to just starting with the Olympics. And I am glad that the medal count has come out. And so that's the part I would like to mention first is how did the US do as compared to other countries? And in overall, we weren't first place overall in the medal counts. But hey, that's not so bad for us because we were number two with an impressive 12 gold medals and 12 silver medals and 9 bronze medals, which makes for a total of 33 medals altogether. That put us in second place of any country's federation. And who came in first place, that was Norway. So I say good for Norway. And they had a super impressive 18 gold medals. so 50% more than the US did. And they had 12 silver medals and 11 bronze medals, and so that gave them a total of 41 medals altogether, so very good for Norway. And then, just to mention the people who placed after that, third was Italy, and then followed by Germany, and then Japan. So that's the first five countries altogether: Norway, US, Italy, Germany, Japan. And number six, seven, and eight, I was happy about because they're all countries where French is an official language. And so that would be France, and then Switzerland, and then Canada, of course. And so, speaking of Canada, one of the last events in the Olympics that I know of was the men's hockey uh, final match, which was between the U.S. and Canada. And of course, the U.S. won. So we got the gold medal in hockey, which I'm extra impressed because we beat Canada, of all people, which they seem to be the best at hockey because it's totally their thing. So good for us for even beating them. And now, sad parts about the Olympics are, for one, I did a video about this just a couple of days before the Olympics started, where Italians and their politicians and the citizens did not want any part of American ice at the Olympic, immigrations and customs enforcement, and sadly, one department of theirs, one part of them was there, and that is um, Homeland Security, National Homeland Security Investigations, which is a part of ICE, because ICE is part of the Department of Homeland Security. And and when I did my video a few weeks back now, right before the Olympics started, I was talking about all the politicians who were against it, right? And then just pretty much the day after or 2 days after I did the live stream about that, then citizens in Italy started protesting, and so they didn't want us there either. And one thing I did like about the protest is they must have gotten this from seeing what was going on in Minnesota, because a lot of the Italians were using whistles in their protests, which is pretty cool. And um, huh. Anyway, sorry, I'm just reading things in the chat. Thank you again, everybody, for being here. And I like to just keep moving on with what I was talking about. And so, yeah, sadly, and some of the protests ended up getting a little, well, violence ended up going on a little bit. Don't mess with the Italian authorities, I'll tell you that much. And another thing notable about this year's Olympics involving American ice is how many American athletes, many of our Olympians, actually, when they had the platform on the Olympics and all that, they ended up speaking out against the actions of ice, and which, good for them, speaking their mind when they do have the platform and all that. I don't think anybody um, uh, reaches any higher point in athletics than the Olympics, so good for them for taking advantage of that. But sadly, President Trump was, well, he took offense to that and really trashed every one of them. Anytime he has a criticism of somebody who doesn't agree with him, um, he tends to insult them. His criticisms end up becoming super personal. So sorry for them that that happened to them. And I guess one other notable thing for me about the Olympics this year was that once again, Russian athletes couldn't compete as part of the Russian Federation because the Russian Federation was banned from these Olympics yet again. I think the same thing was true in Paris for the 2024 Olympics in the summer a couple of years ago. And and this is in part to do with they were caught in a doping scandal, so performance enhancing drugs for lots of their athletes, and also for because we just passed the 4th year anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and that is still going on. So they're not welcome at the Olympics anymore. And but some of the Russian athletes were allowed to compete. They just competed as uh, unaffiliated, unassociated individual athletes, right? So no Russian flag and no national anthem, anything like that. But their athletes were competing without that, and that's so sad for them that they couldn't be representing their country right now. And so, yeah, that's about all I had to say about the Olympics. Um, yeah, and so good for us in the U.S. for being number two. Fantastic. And even better for Norway being number one. Hooray for you. I just want to say that in all fairness. And so on to the second topic, which is, I guess, related to Black History Month. This month, February. And I do kind of sometimes feel jealous about that because I teach foreign languages. And February is also uh, Modern Language Month. Modern languages are to be celebrated this month, and a lot of times we get quite overshadowed by Black History Month. But not that I'm against Black History Month at all, because I think it's very good for us to recognize, which we do in the US and Canada. We both celebrate Black History Month in February. All the contributions of African Americans to our society, and and sadly, on February 17th, smack in the middle of Black History Month, Jesse Jackson passed away, and that's a really upsetting thing to me because, again, like I said earlier, he's been a civil rights leader in the U.S. for a good 60 years or so. And so sadly, he ends up, well, he can do that no longer from the other side of the grave. And just to give an idea of how important he was and how influential he was back when Martin Luther King Jr. was still alive. The two of them were hanging out together and doing stuff together and combining for their civil rights activism. And and in April of 1968, Martin Luther King Jr., of course, was unalived. We got to say that for well, YouTube censorship and everything, so unalived. And Jesse Jackson was actually with him on that day, and and he sort of took over the baton and became Martin Luther King Jr.'s successor in the civil rights movement in the U.S. And so he was very important starting all the way back in the 1960s. And then we get into the 1970s when he created Operation PUSH. And PUSH, PUSH, is an acronym for People United in Saving Humanity. So they were all about equality for all races and equity, and that sort of went in along the same lines as another group he created in the 1980s, which was the National Rainbow Coalition, who again they were speaking out and doing protests and lots of other political things for equality among all races in the U.S. And we think of them as more of a black rights group, but they were really all about racial equality for everybody. And so that was important too. And then eventually in the 1990s, those two groups, Operation PUSH and the National Rainbow Coalition, they merged together to form one group, but still very active as far as civil rights and promoting equality among all the races in the U.S. And speaking of the 1990s, in that decade, Jesse Jackson was actually hosting a show on CNN called Both Sides. And so he got to do a lot of political commenting on his own for throughout the 90s and all that. And I shouldn't have skipped over the 80s already because I should, yeah, mention that in the 80s, he ran for president twice. First in 1984 and then in 1988. And he never got the Democratic Party's nomination that he was actually seeking for. But he did, though, come in second. He was the runner up in 1988, and sadly, he did not get to run because the Democrats ran Michael Dukakis, who was a former governor of Massachusetts, and so he didn't get to run in the general election, but he came in second, and he got more votes in the Democratic primary than anybody except for Michael Dukakis, and so he was actually, that was the most successful uh, bid for president by any African American ever before Barack Obama. So I think it's important to recognize Jesse Jackson as him having gone further than any African American had in his bid to become president. And so it certainly sort of helped pave the way a little bit for Obama to come along and win the thing eventually. Um, of course, after George H.W. Bush had, and after Bill Clinton, and and of course after George W. Bush, then Barack Obama comes along and wins it. But yeah, I did want to mention Jesse Jackson in this little live stream because I feel his passing is a real shame, and I do wonder who's going to take up the mantle here. Who exactly? I know that Reverend Al Sharpton is still alive, among other people, but still, it's sad, and I hope that just doesn't leave a vacuum that never gets filled without Jesse Jackson here anymore. And so that was now uh, the two main first things I wanted to mention again: the Olympics. Hooray for the U.S. for being number two, even though it drew extra attention to how much um, ice was going wrong the month before that in Minneapolis, especially. Anyway, drew extra attention to that. But yeah, so the Olympics and then Jesse Jackson. And I think it's kind of appropriate that his remembrance services have been going on during Black History Month because I think he was a super important part of that, a part of African Americans making history in the U.S. And so the third thing I wanted to talk about is also pretty sad. Like I said, today is day 27 now that Nancy Guthrie has been missing. Of course, this got huge media attention, mostly because her daughter, Savannah Guthrie, is a well known TV personality on the Today show. Um, and so this has gotten more media coverage than any kidnapping since the Lindbergh baby. And so that's impressive because the Lindbergh baby, that was back in 1932, right? So nearly a century goes by, and then bam, Nancy Guthrie gets thrust into the spotlight there. And I'm really, really worried for her because, as you probably already know, she's an 84-year-old woman without perfect health or anything like that. And she she did yeah, sadly it sounds like she was taken in the middle of the night, pretty much right out of bed. And how you get an 84-year-old out of bed quickly, I don't know, because That is, they're not very mobile and not super responsive right away. And sadly, we have found no. The kidnappers, well, the alleged kidnappers anyway, have offered no proof that she's alive. No signs of life from her, and that gets me really worried, especially because speaking of the Lindbergh baby, that baby, okay, the Lindberghs did indeed pay a ransom through some intermediaries. Um, very cool. um, sorry, my chat is suggesting things to me. It's cool. And So the Lindbergh baby, they did pay the ransom, and the ransom was collected, and they led them to, sadly, a shallow grave with an unalive baby in it, and so that doesn't make me think uh, any good things about the Nancy Guthrie situation because I was thinking, my lord, even if you do pay the ransom, no guarantee, right? Anyway, and plus, even if she is still alive, 27 days now, I'm sure she's been feeling like she's going through hell. Um, Pretty sure. So that's all really sad. And sadly, in addition to not having any signs of life, of course, if anybody knows anything, any further details on this, please add it to the chat. I would love that. I would certainly read it out loud and consider it. But in addition to having seen no signs that she is really still alive, even the DNA sampling didn't really pan out much. We didn't identify anybody in CODIS, which is, of course, the national DNA database for law enforcement used. And although they have been able to identify that they found DNA in her house, which was not hers or anybody belonging to her family or to her immediate entourage. So this points to possibly this person was a stranger to them. I don't know. I do feel a little bit about it, better about it if it wasn't a family member, and a lot of people were pointing fingers at the family earlier, but I think we're done doing that now. And and there was no real big news today, as far as I know, because the biggest leads today were there's a little new video came out, and so now the FBI have literally thousands of hours of video footage to watch, so they're busy doing that and not really updating on us on this thing. And one thing that's interesting to me about this case is it's in Pima County, Arizona, in the Tucson area in Arizona. And I have three family members there, actually, a great aunt and two great uncles. And nobody is liking their sheriff anymore. And I mean, nobody from elsewhere in the country is liking the Pima County sheriff anymore because one, it seems like the FBI and the county sheriffs have not been working so well together, not been super well in communicating everything to each other. And also, on this space in the YouTube space, a lot of people got mad at the sheriff out there because he was basically telling all the live streamers go away. Um, and so many people doing a lot of coverage on this on YouTube and other streaming platforms got really pissed because they're all like, hey, we're journalists too. We have the right to be here too and expose what's going on. And so, yes, he has garnered a heck of a lot of hate from the online community who likes to watch streamers. And so, yeah, I feel bad for my Aunt Pat's sheriff's department. Nobody's liking them anymore. Anyway, and yeah, so that's the sad part about the Nancy Guthrie case. The saddest part for me is that we still don't know if she's alive or not, and who knows if we ever will figure that out. I mean, um, for all I know, she's in Mexico right now. If she is alive at all, anyway. So that's yeah, very sad for me too. So now that's couple of sad topics in a row, and so I guess something, well, not as depressing as a kidnapping or someone passing away, but might be depressing for some people, is we had the State of the Union address this week. Uh, President Trump made the State of the Union address, and the thing is, it was protested by a lot of people, including Midas Touch, who was live streaming something that they were calling the People's State of the Union. And that, to me, I got to see the first hour of that because it started at 8 o'clock on Tuesday night. And the State of the Union itself wasn't starting till 9, so I started by watching the People's State of the Union. And one thing that's interesting about that was that some of the Democrats who did not show up to the State of the Union, some of the congressional representatives who didn't show up to the State of the Union, actually went to the other one, went to the People's State of the Union, which was near the Lincoln Memorial. Um, so not too far from where the actual State of the Union was going on, and some of them were very interesting speakers. I had to sort of interrupt watching that and go watch the State of the Union, and then catch the rest of the People's State of the Union on replay. But that to me was interesting that some of the empty seats where Democrats would be sitting at the State of the Union were actually some were people who attended neither the State of the Union nor the People's State of the Union, and others who skipped the State of the Union but only to go speak at the People's State of the Union. And that was cool to get so many of them there. And what else? Oh, it's worth noting that the State of the Union this year, 2026, was the longest one ever. The longest speech ever, the longest State of the Union address ever in American history, and and of course, unsurprisingly, President Trump took credit for solving all the problems that the U.S. was having. Right within the first couple minutes, I was already kind of angry because I had heard several things that were not true, right? He's all like, oh, our economy is booming and everybody's respecting us again, and prices are coming down, like all these things that to me don't compute. How could you tell the audience of America this and expect anybody to believe you when we can look around us and see that groceries are more expensive, utility bills are more expensive, prices are not coming down. His tariffs have pretty much made that worse. But anyway, um, so yeah, he took a lot of credit, but this was mostly, in my opinion, theater, showmanship, and all that coupled with misinformation. And I mean, why wouldn't he do that? Because politically, it seems to work for him. Like a lot of his supporters have been quoted as saying that, sure, they're aware he's not telling the truth sometimes, but they like it that he's speaking his mind and all that. So, wow. Um, but a couple of things to do with the State of the Union. I wanted to mention at least, well, two of the people who got ejected, who got escorted right out of there. The first one would be Green, not the singer, but the Democratic congressional representative from Texas. Um, and he was not kicking and screaming or anything like that, but he was protesting in his own way. Of he was carrying a little sign that looked to me very much handwritten, that said on it, "Black people aren't apes." Let me see if I got those words exactly right. Yeah, black people aren't apes. that's what the sign said. And of course, that was a protest against Donald Trump's post on Truth Social, the one where near the end of the video we saw Barack Obama and Michelle Obama's faces on put on apes. So that's like one of the oldest racist tropes in the book. And so he was protesting that. And so even though he wasn't loud about it or anything, they did. They escorted him out and made him leave the thing. So that was. Uh, some would say, "Oh, he was a nuisance trying to disrupt it, so good thing they made him leave." And others might say, "Yeah, but what about free speech? He wasn't even interrupting anything. He was just carrying a sign." And but the other person who got kicked out, who I'm even more sad about this, because she also got arrested afterwards and manhandled by the security there, which is unfortunate. And her name is, I'm going to check my notes to make sure I get it all right. Oh, Aliyah Rahman. And she was a guest of Ilan Omar, who is a congressional representative for, I think, the 5th District of Minnesota, which means the Minneapolis area, I'm pretty sure. And so this had to do with the ICE actions in Minneapolis, and I'm not talking about um, Alex Preddy, uh, but I mean, this woman, Aliyah Rahman. She was a guest of one congressperson of and why was she brought there? I think her presence there was kind of a protest in and of itself, because we she got famous just in a month before that, just in January, for um, she was driving in her vehicle on the way to a doctor's appointment. She's a bit disabled, so she was going to a doctor's appointment to help deal with her medical issues, and she came across a place where ICE was involved and some people were protesting ICE, and they literally dragged her out of a vehicle, even though her rotator cuffs on her shoulders were not well, even though she was disabled, and they dragged her and all that. And we have plenty of video footage of that. It got widely shown, and so from that, she still had injuries, quite still disabled at the State of the Union. And then she was sort of protesting there again silently, uh, by staying standing, even when people were supposed to be sitting for Donald Trump. And that's what they ended up arresting her for, is not following the order to sit down, as well as I think trying to disrupt a congressional function, something like that. And the sad part is, again, they were yanking on her arms, and she had two torn rotator cuffs, one for each shoulder, pretty much. And you can't just yank somebody like that and drag them behind you, right? You're going to do physical harm to them, physical injury to them. And so they did have to take her to a hospital and have her medically treated before bringing her back to the police station and booking her later that night. And so that to me is super upsetting, because what the heck happened to free speech and the right to protest in this country? I don't know. It makes me very sad. But yeah, so that's what was going on with the State of the Union and all that. And thank you all for not jumping down my throat, for getting to talk about the new to talk about politics and whatnot. Usually I get jumped over whenever I bring up anything to do with politics. So that makes me feel better that it's a safe space for me to talk about the 5th thing I wanted to address. And that was also super big tonight, well, today and yesterday, because the Clintons came to testify in front of the House Oversight Committee about the Epstein saga, about the Epstein stuff going on, and um, and that was interesting to me because I couldn't see what the heck they were doing dragging Hillary into the mix. Because, okay, when they saw some photos with Bill Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein together, a lot of America was just like, yep, of course, Bill Clinton's in the Epstein files. Like, we all kind of remember him as being a total creep and a sexual predator and all that. So nobody was super surprised to find out a creep like that had been hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein. But I was thinking the whole time that, okay, if Bill is off with Jeffrey Epstein doing whatever they were doing, um, Hillary probably had no clue where her husband was or who he was with or what he was doing. I'm just guessing, anyway, that he would try to keep this a little hidden from her, right? And yesterday, it was kind of, yeah, it didn't make a lot of sense to have her there because as far as she could, well, actually, we can't know everything that was said in those hearings yet because, as far as I know, the transcripts still haven't been released. And while the Clintons didn't want to comply with these subpoenas, but they did eventually, even though they wanted this to be an open hearing, open to the public, so reporters could be there and cover it and everything. But no, Congress didn't agree. They did a closed door session, which means nobody was supposed to leak any information out of there, but they did plenty of times. And Hillary ended up saying how she never met Jeffrey Epstein, like she had no memory of ever meeting him, and so she had never been to any of his properties or hung out with him or anything like that. Never ever, according to Hillary, anyway. And um, and her husband Bill, before he started testifying today, I think within his opening statement, he said at first he was like, "Okay, before we get started here, I'm gonna get personal." And he was saying how Hillary had no memory of meeting Jeffrey Epstein, no real association with him or anything, so she should not have gotten dragged into the mix. And he said specifically, I think the words he used were that it didn't matter if you subpoenaed 10 people or 10,000. Either way, it was a mistake to include her. So that was interesting, him sticking up for her in that way. And another thing, because she's not even alleged, like, there's nothing in the files that have been released publicly that would imply that she would be allegedly involved in any crimes or anything like that, or that she would be involved in much of anything. I think they just put her on the stand because they were trying to get some dirt about Bill, about her husband from her. Was you can't really do that because they're spouses, and so I don't know if Congress has the same rule as court does, where you don't have to testify against your spouse, but whatever. And so that part, so being she was the former first lady, and she has very little to do with the files. Most of the times, her name is mentioned or in things like clippings of newspaper articles and magazine articles and things like that. Not even so much direct correspondence with her or anything. So I'm doubting they figure they would get much out of her except possibly some dirt on her husband. Who knows? And one of the biggest things that came out of her damn testimony was when Representative Lauren Boebert leaked the photo of Hillary, which was totally against the rules because remember, it was a closed door session and nobody's supposed to be leaking photos from there out to the world. But that one went right on social media, and Lauren Boebert is, well, She was an idiot in that case because in the picture you can see near the bottom of the picture the plaque with her, it said Rep Bobert right on it. So she gave away exactly who leaked the picture. But from her comment afterwards, I don't even know if she was trying to hide the fact that she leaked it, because I heard a reporter ask her, "Why did you leak the photo?" And literally her answer was, "Why not?" And I was thinking, wow, yeah, that's maybe why not, because it's totally against the rules that your Congress people set forth for yourself, but whatever. Um, so again, like I said, Bill Clinton didn't think it was fair that Hillary was subpoenaed too. Neither did Hillary. And so did a lot of us who just doubted from the get that Hillary had anything to do with Jeffrey Epstein. Um, and I was assuming that even if her husband was up to no good with Jeffrey Epstein, he would have kept Hillary the heck out of it, right? Wouldn't want her around for that. And um, and so the fact that they did nonetheless subpoena her has a lot of people wondering why the heck nobody subpoenaed Melania Trump, who's in the Epstein files a whole lot more times than Hillary is, and in lots of pictures where Epstein and all that. Um, but between Bill and Hillary, between yesterday and today, that was the first time that a sitting or former president had been uh, subpoenaed to testify before Congress in over 40 years now. Um, so this was a real exception that they brought the Clintons in for this. And so since they made the exception in that case, then that has a lot of people asking, so why don't they subpoena Melania? Because, I mean, rumor has it that Epstein introduced Melania and Donald Trump to each other, and her name was mentioned many times in the files, not nearly as many times as her husband's, of course, but uh, many times. And people do, yeah, wonder why the heck attack Hillary and not Melania. Of course, Melania is the current first lady, so maybe there's that. And I doubt that they're gonna subpoena Trump either. Um, I doubt that they would, even though his name appears, I think, more times in the Epstein files except than anybody except for Ghislaine Maxwell, right? And so he might have something to add to this, have something to say about it. But let's talk instead about what Bill Clinton had to say about this. And he said, first of all, after trashing them for subpoenaing Hillary and all that, he said he opened with, "No person is above the law, even presidents." So he seemed to be cooperative pretty much, as far as I can tell, through all the grilling he went through today. I think it was 6 hours worth. Um, he was answering questions fully and presumably honestly, and so that's good for him. And he said that, and he did not implicate Donald Trump in anything. He said that Donald Trump never spoke to Bill Clinton about anything involving any crimes with Jeffrey Epstein, right? So he had a chance to totally throw him under the bus, but he decided not to, I guess, unless that was a totally honest answer that he never heard Trump talking about any crimes related to Epstein. So that, yeah, he was being truthful. And the funny thing is that, well, there are places in the files where Donald Trump is pretty much implicated in some alleged crimes, like how many women have come out as victims of his when they were younger and all that. Anyway, I don't want to really go into it. I'm trying to be careful with my language here on YouTube. But Bill Clinton is not. There's nothing in any of those files, as far as I can tell, that really would implicate Bill Clinton in any crime associated with Jeffrey Epstein. Um, we know, I think it's been shown that he did travel to Epstein Island and take his private jet, well, on Epstein's jet and all that. But Bill Clinton's story now is, hey, this was a uh, fairly short term acquaintance a long time ago, and that was a long before the light came out about actually before any light was shed on Epstein's crimes. And so he said, I didn't see anything, I didn't do anything wrong. So that was pretty much, I'm innocent and ignorant of all this. So that's a pretty safe way to put it. And he also said that even though he didn't see anything and didn't do anything wrong, if he had suspected anything, he would have turned him in himself. He would have turned Epstein in himself and tried to lead the charge for justice. So that is more, Bill Clinton um, playing it safe and reminding everybody I'm not the bad guy here. Um, Although without throwing Trump under the bus or anything. And I do like the one quotation from Bill Clinton's testimony today that everyone seems to be globbing on to is he said, I saw nothing and I did nothing wrong. So there's his story, and he is sticking to it. And I guess the Clintons are now done, and so this does bring to me again the question of, is it possible that Congress would subpoena Donald and Melania Trump? Or do they just get out of jail free card? I don't know. It will be weird because, like I said, this was the first time in over 40 years that a sitting or former president had been subpoenaed to testify before Congress. And so, yeah. Anyway, so there's that. So that's that was all the topics that I had prepared on for today. And again, good for the U.S. for coming in second in the Olympics, having the 12 gold medals and 12 silver medals and 9 bronze. That 33 medal count made us the second winningest team in the Olympics. And so good for Norway, too. Good for you in being number one. And again, I'm sad about Jesse Jackson's passing, and I do wonder who the heck is going to fill that void as a civil rights leader to take his place, since he was pretty much the guy who took Martin Luther King Jr.'s place nearly 60 years ago now. So yeah, I do hope somebody does fill in that void, and I also hope that that he does not just this Black History Month, but for Black History Months and years to come. I hope that Jesse Jackson continues to be remembered, even though his passing won't have been quite as recent anymore in a little while. And once again, I don't have a lot of hope in the case of Nancy Guthrie. I wish I did. I'm hoping for the best for her, but I'm not very optimistic because the authorities still haven't gotten so much closer to figuring out where she is or in what state or anything. Anyway, yeah. And so, again, the State of the Union and the Clintons testifying both had a lot to do with politics, so I don't want to jump back into that just yet. And so I would ask anybody if you do have anything else you would like me to discuss about what went on in America this week, what big news happened in America this week. I would really like to. or if any of you, yeah, if you would just like to announce something too, that would be fine as well. I am very much open to conversation about any of that. And and I'm glad. What's interesting, okay, I will go back to talking about the Clintons testifying for just a minute. One thing that kind of surprises me is that I haven't seen a lot of people jumping on the Clintons and calling them liars from their testimonies over the last 2 days, because it sounds to me that like that's something that people are likely to call the Clintons. Nobody trusts Hillary, especially, right? With the big email scandal and all that, right? And um, and a lot of people don't trust Bill either. Anyway, um, but yeah, so that was all the topics I wanted to talk about for today, and I wonder if there's anything I might be forgetting. If anybody thinks there's anything I might be forgetting, please let me know in the chat. I would be happy to cover it. No, nothing? Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you everybody for sticking around and sticking with me through my rant about all this stuff. I hope you enjoyed it. And again, please make sure to give this video a thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed to my channel yet, please do consider subscribing. I'm looking very much forward to talking to you again really soon. So until then, catch you around next time. Bye bye.